Welcome back to Listen to the Helpers, a podcast created by the Fred Rogers Institute to elevate the voices of helpers everywhere. Fred Rogers once said, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" Today we're joined by Kevin Talbert, an education professor at the College of Idaho and a PNC fellow with us at the Fred Rogers Institute. At the end of this episode, stay tuned as Kenzie and I reflect on our discussion with Kevin in the context of Fred Rogers' legacy and our own work at the Fred Rogers Institute. I'd like to start out by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're
All
located,
right.
what you do.
Awesome. Well, thank you for inviting me to chat with you. I'm Kevin Talbert. I am a professor of education at the College of Idaho, which is a liberal arts college about half hour west of Boise, Idaho, so southwest Idaho. It's move-in day today. Happy New Year to all you teachers who celebrate your new year in the fall instead of in the dead of winter. And excited to get going again. I was formerly a high school social studies teacher back in Ohio, where I did my all my college studies and taught. And I'm the dad of a delightful 3.5, almost 4 year old. And certainly much of my learning from Fred Rogers has come as much through being a parent as it has through my work as a teacher.
I can
Awesome. So,
definitely relate to that my learning of Fred Rogers has doubled in the time that I've
Yeah,
been a parent.
totally. Totally.
yeah. So what brought you to Idaho in particular from Ohio?
Yeah, so it was this job. I knew, I went to grad school with the intention of becoming a college professor, a professor of education, and I like to eat and have a place to live and stuff like that. And so, when I was graduating, I said, "Oh, I'd cast my net wide. I don't, have anything in particular that draws me or that keeps me in Ohio." At that time, I didn't have a family. I wasn't married. And so thought, I can always come back if I need to, but let me just do this grand adventure and find a school that I think's a good fit. And I hit the jackpot. The college has been a great fit. I love Idaho. So yeah, it's been amazing. Met my wife here in new faculty orientation, and the rest is history. So
Oh, that's so cool that
yeah,
it's become such a home for you now.
yeah, totally, totally,
So you
yeah,
are
for
a
sure.
professor of education and you work with
Yes.
service teachers.
Mostly pre-service, yeah. I do some work with in-service teachers, so those who already have teaching positions and then are, come back to extend their work. But most of my work has been with pre-service teachers who are, learning, who have the desire, the heart to be a teacher, and are learning to be a teacher. My work is in the sort of social and cultural theory around education. Why do we school? Questions of purpose. What is this thing called education? What's that all about? Um, and helping students, yeah, sort of take a broader scope on their teaching, beyond just the methods, but also the why. Why are you doing this? What do you want out of this? How does school fit in a larger conversation about democracy and living well together in the world?
Oh, that is really, really interesting and really impactful work. And that leads me to our next question for you.
Mhm.
You're working with students to figure out their why. Why do they do what they want
Yeah.
to do? Why do you do what you do?
Yeah. Oh man, I mean, well, first off, you mentioned it, right? Like sort of the depth of the questions that I get to ask with students and explore, and then that spark that comes, right? When you watch them grapple with those questions and then find their own why, right? And begin to go, hey, I think I like this, and hey, I think I'm good at this. Um, but I wouldn't be able to do that without someone having invested in me, right? I mean, we all know one of Fred's favorite quotes, right, is appreciation is a holy thing. If there hadn't been people who looked at me, saw something, and said, you might be good at this thing called teaching, right? I don't know if I'd have pursued it, right? But I had people at multiple points in my life say, you might have something. You might have a gift for this. You should think about it, right? And it took them seeing me, I think, authentically, for me to go, okay, yeah, I don't know that I don't know that I buy it, but sure, right? And then you sort of grow into that thing, right? That others see in you. And so I've been blessed with multiple instances in my life where that was ca the case.
That is so cool that you're
Yeah.
inspiring the next generation of helpers in that way. And I love that when you made that comment of somebody saw that in you and you didn't know if you believed it at first, but okay,
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
Yeah.
I'll try to
Yeah.
do that for you. That kind of makes me think
Yeah.
of that like imposter syndrome that I'm sure
Hmm.
so many
Totally.
feel, especially going into just adulthood in general and then trying to be an adult
Sure.
in the
Yeah.
real world. And that
Yeah.
I'm sure that the students that you work with are right in the heart of that
Totally.
imposter syndrome or trying to figure out
Yeah.
what fit in the world. So
Yeah.
how cool to
Totally.
be a guiding light for them in that time.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I hope I'm a guiding light, not just annoying. But yeah, I mean, it's part of what for me makes the job so fun, right? And so inspiring for myself, right? And inspiring in the sort of dorky sort of Latin root of the word, right? Is to breathe into, right? That breathes into me, right? A sort of freshness and a reconnection to my own purpose because I get to see them, yeah, sort of go through that. Well, wait, this guy says I might be good at this, and oh, this guy's, presenting some ideas I've never gotten up close to, but I think I like it, right? And then they start to see their own confidence, and you kind of go, my evil plan is working, right? Yeah, it definitely for me is, yeah, it's a both and, right? Like I think I get to see them get inspired, but that inspires me right back.
No, that's so amazing. I think you and Sarah kind of touched upon this a little bit about the idea of the helper and how
Yeah.
Fred said to look for the helpers. So, what do you think it means to be a helper?
Oh man. Well, first off, maybe I need to just sort of say on the record that I think we too often, when we share that meme of Fred's, right, look for the helpers, we forget that the context in which he often said that was to adults, not saying to just look, be passive, wait for somebody else to help. He was actually saying, hey, the kids need to look for the helpers. You need to be the helper, right? And so I don't want to miss that, right? So um, look for the helpers, but also be one if you can, right? And so your question really is about how do we be a helper, right? How is it that we can be a helper? And what does that mean? Um, and, for me, what does that mean in the context of being a teacher, right? And I think there are a number of inspirations we can take from Fred's work. One that we've already touched on, right? Like the appreciation, right? Can you see people more clearly, right? When I talk with my teachers, how do you see your students better, right? Like, how can you know them more clearly, right? So that you can shuffle through some of the sort of baggage that we might have that filters and frames our reading of those students. How can we read them and understand them better? And then how do we as adults build a better world for kids, right? To me, anybody that's a helper is trying to make this world less awful for children. Um, and again, I think that was part of Fred's core message, and part of why his work has been so inspiring to me, why I found such connections to his work as I think about it, for engaging teachers. The helpers of those who are out there doing things to make the world better, and especially to make it better for kids, right? Um, I mean, I guess another way of thinking about it for me is, we often talk about, oh, children are our future. But again, that kind of bugs me because it lets us off the hook so often, right? It's like, oh, our kids will come bail us out, right? Well, no, kids are our present. What kind of world are we building now that we've brought these kids into, right? Like, no, right? Like, the world that our kids are in implicates us, right? So let's make it better. Let's be some helpers for these kids, and make the barriers lighter, make the burden lighter, right? Um, yeah. And so I think about that a lot, even with how I approach teaching teachers and what it means to be a teacher.
I love that perspective shift of thinking about, of course, children are our future, and everybody, I don't
Yeah.
think people can disagree with that because they quite
Right.
literally will be the next generation of adults. But I
Yeah.
love that perspective shift of yes, and what
Yeah.
are we living in now? What can we do for them
Yeah.
now? Let's not wait
Yeah.
for them to build a better future. And yes, they hopefully will, but also,
Right.
what can we do now?
Yeah, let's not screw it up so much that they have to.
Right.
Right? Like, can we let our kids coast a little? That wouldn't be the end of the world. That they'll have problems of their own, right? That their world will have to encounter. We don't need to make it worse while we're at it. And we
Absolutely.
we can do the opposite if we choose to.
Yes. And thinking about you explaining how being a helper means to inspire other adults to be helpers,
Yeah.
not only do you work with pre-service teachers and some in-service teachers, but you're also a PNC fellow with the Fred Rogers
Yeah.
Institute. And in that work, you get to help current helpers. And can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the work that you do as a fellow with us and your work in
Yeah, sure.
ed?
Yeah, for sure. So the work, I mean, grew out first of my participation, right, of the Educators Neighborhood Group, and that cohort of folks who the Institute is so good at setting up these meeting places, right? And putting interesting people and experience in Fred's work, right, in front of us. And so, I just wanted to keep digging in, and then you all were gracious enough to go, hey, do you want to lead a small group of fellow higher ed folks? And I said, that sounds cool, right? Let's do that. And so, yeah, I facilitate a discussion group of other folks, some way affiliated with higher ed. Not all of them are teacher educators. In fact, this past year, most of them weren't, right? They were higher ed in some capacity. But, we had folks who did research and deans of their particular institution. We had historians and environmental studies folks. But it was such a rich because we were able to sort of again explore the depth of Fred's pedagogy, right? What I now have come to call his Fredagogy. Because why not make a pun out of that if you can, right? From so many different angles, right? It's so rich for exploration. Even though on the surface it seems so simple. And so yeah, I had the delight of just trying to ask good questions in front of people, right? Which in some ways is how I sum up my job. Like, what do you do? Well, I go to work every day and I try to ask good questions in front of other people. Right? And that's the essence of what I try to do. And sometimes that works better than others.
No, I love the term pedagogy. I feel like I'm going to have to
Yeah.
use that now in my
All right.
day-to-day language and
Awesome.
also
Yeah.
eliminate children are the future. That might be eliminated from my
Ah, there you
vocabulary
go.
as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
but just getting to work with the higher ed fellows and all of those different backgrounds,
Hmm.
what do you think was the outcome of that? Like, despite the fact that they're still all higher ed,
Sure.
those different
Yeah.
contexts, though, like, do you still feel that they were able to connect in some capacity?
I mean, I hope so, right? I think they expressed, some connection to the content of Fred's work that is illuminating in their particular context. But I also think one of the recurring themes, not just in that group, but in my own experience and in hearing reflections from other groups through Educators Neighborhood I've been affiliated with, I think one of the common themes is the invitation to stillness, right? We get to take this moment where we push everything out of the way and we center ourselves in Fred's work, right? And so there's a sense of sort of, yeah, stillness and peace about it, um, that people appreciate. It's like, oh, I just get to take a moment to breathe in the world, with other people who share similar affinities, um, and dig into these deeper questions. And boy, that's refreshing from the hustle and bustle of the rest of my life. Um, there's it's often quite the contrast to walk out of a faculty meeting uh, and into the work of Fred, right? Oh, such high stakes, and we can haggle over, what is meaningful, right? To the work of being a college professor, but sometimes is also disconnected from these questions of deeper purpose, right? We're sort of haggling over um, sort of efficiencies, but this moment to center and go, okay, yep, I'm reminding myself of my own goodness in the world and of why I want to do this. Um, and I think, yeah, I think that's been a key takeaway for folks.
I'm so glad to hear that that's such a
Yeah,
recurring theme and a key takeaway for the group
yeah,
have led, and hopefully that will continue to be a theme
yeah,
upcoming
yeah, for sure.
thing. But
Yeah,
that makes me that makes my heart happy to know
yeah, yeah,
that people are pulling away from that group because everybody
yeah,
needs that, and that's
yeah,
such a key theme in the work of Fred Rogers anyway. So
yeah, for
I'm glad
sure.
that that's a message
Yeah,
that's spreading across contexts and live
yeah,
walks
yeah,
and all
yeah,
of people.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
So, can you tell us, thinking about your work in higher ed,
Hmm.
what is something that maybe you wish people knew about what you do? Maybe something that goes unseen.
Oh man. Um, I mean, I don't know if this is unique to higher ed, as much as it is to the work of teaching, of being an educator. And that is, I mean, not to again just fill the whole episode with like Fred cliches, but how much of it is invisible to the naked eye, right? How much you can miss in the beauty of what happens with a good teacher, and how much we miss of the preparation and the heart and soul and spirit that they're bringing to it, right? There's so much behind it, and there's so much rich that happens in it. So for example, right? So my son is not quite 4. We've got him in swim lessons. We're hoping, he can learn to swim, and he's at a local YMCA. And watching this swim teacher as a person who teaches teachers has just been marvelous, right? Because there's these subtle moves that she's able to do, right? To get him to do things he's not otherwise inclined to, and there's a joy there, right? And my eye, I think, is trained to see that, but I think it'd be something so easy to miss in what she does, right? Um, and I don't think it's accidental, and I don't think it's just because of a spark of, I think she's probably practiced, right? And cultivate, right? It comes through experience, comes through training, um, but it's so easy to miss. Um, and again, it's one of the things I talk about with my teachers is I think so much of people's assumptions about teaching is that it's so easy, right? And they just don't know. And so can we make it clearer about what exactly goes into it, right? Like how big that undertaking is. And then also the how much beauty there is in what a good teacher is able to do, right? With all kinds of sort of nuance and subtlety. Just watching a teacher in their element is just so beautiful. So yeah, I think I would want people to recognize that better, because I think it would help, might help chill us out, right? In some of the negative things we sometimes say about schools and about teaching, I think we might have a more expanded view.
You're so right that a lot of it goes so unnoticed, and there's so
Yeah,
much intentionality that teachers
yeah,
of any age, whether it's higher,
yeah,
elementary, middle, high school,
totally.
a swim coach, at any kind,
Yeah, totally.
there's so much intentionality that goes into every little detail of a
Yeah,
lesson plan, of an activity,
yeah,
an assignment, everything. And
totally. Yeah,
it's I feel like that swim coach I hope that you feel encouraged to tell that swimmer
Yeah,
that he
totally.
already.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure he is doing a great job,
Yeah,
and
totally.
that must feel so good when somebody does
Yeah.
recognize.
Yeah, well, and especially, right? Like this, you're putting your child into the trust of that person, right? And so you want that, right? But when that's reciprocated, it's such a beautiful thing. And my contention is, the overwhelming majority of teachers want to do that and are doing that, right? And so yeah, right. Are there folks who fall short of that? Sure. Right. Okay, you solved that 4% of the problem. Now what do you got? Right. So no, totally. Yeah, recognizing that and affirming that when we see it, I think is crucial.
Absolutely. And I know when I got my undergraduate degree in
Yeah.
childhood education, so I went through
Yeah.
student teaching experience, and I
Uh,
remember even going through when I had to be observed in my student teaching, and
yep.
a professor
Yeah.
from St. Vincent come and observe.
Yep.
Obviously, I'm nervous. I'm a new teacher. I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
teaching a lesson for the first time, but I worked so hard in making sure that every
Yeah.
little piece was
Yep.
just so.
Yeah.
And trying to be so intentional about everything that I'm doing and trying to
Yeah.
be inspired by Fred Rogers in the process because I was already
Right.
involved in the Institute's work. And when
Uh,
somebody observing me would tell me, oh, this little thing that you did, I noticed that. I would
yeah.
feel over the moon because it'd be like,
Totally.
oh my gosh, it was worth it. All the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Or when a child would be like, oh, like I understand, I get it. Or they would, ask
Right.
a question that I could tell,
Yeah.
I did it. I taught you something.
Yeah.
I feel so
Yeah.
proud of myself.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think that mirrors so much of Fred, right? In the sense that it's so easy to overlook him and oh, he was just a saintly, he fell out of bed good at this, right? But as we know, he practiced being good, right? Like it was for him a disciplined practice to try to be a better appreciator, right? To see kids more. He worked so diligently with Margaret McFarland and with folks who were caregivers for children, right? He didn't just assume he knew it. He didn't have some he really practiced and worked hard, right? And so much of that I think even in Fred was unseen, right? It's so easy to miss that. But I think it's worth it to notice it, to affirm it, and to be transformed by it if we can.
Yeah, I had somewhat of a similar experience. My background's in secondary education.
Ah, sure.
So I've got older kids, but
Yeah.
finished student teaching, they created this like notebook full of like, we're gonna miss you. Here's what we remember most about you. And they're all these
Oh,
like little moments that were so different for like the 70 kids that I had.
yeah,
It was just
right.
so meaningful that they were like, I try to be as intentional as I can, but there's sometimes when, you're have all these kids in the curriculum and you're losing
Yeah.
your mind and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
even though I wasn't trying to be intentional about it, just this small act of kindness that you remember,
Uh,
and that's so important.
yeah. Well, and so Kinsey, I mean, yeah, I think that raises something so crucial to remember, right? What if the kids themselves are the curriculum? What if their growth? What if engaging in them as people and their growth into the world? What if that is the curriculum, right? We get so focused on I've got to do the content and I've got to meet the standards, right? Well, shouldn't those things be in the service? Those shouldn't be the goal. Those should be in the service of accomplishing this growing humanity with each other, right? Because what I hear you say is, oh, all of the evidence was they weren't pointing to some fact you taught them, right? They were expressing, oh, Kenzie saw me in that moment, and this was a fun thing, and this was this shared moment of human relation that we had, right? Oh, beautiful. What if that's the whole point? Right? Like, can we let that be the whole point? Right? No, get those test scores up.
That
Like,
speaks that speaks back to the whole children are not the future, they're the present.
yeah, yes, yes, yes. Yes, yeah. And this is maybe we've entered the soapbox portion of our program, but I just think this is so important to call out and is certainly, so central to the work I try to do with students.
No, that's absolutely amazing. Kind of a related question. You kind of talked about it earlier about your why and why you do what you do.
Mm,
Do you have a story for us that you could share about the time where you remembered what your why?
Oh my. Um, yeah. I mean, so maybe a couple of examples, right? Because when I talked about that, I talked about both people who sort of spoke that why into me, right? Who sort of saw something in me. And I think about my high school French teacher, who, after a presentation I did in class, she said, hey, you should think about this. I think you've got something, right? She very directly sort of saw my why in that moment, or spoke a why into me. And then um, recently, a couple years ago, I always have students do end of course reflections, and they can record it. So I don't make them write it. They can choose to just do a little video reflection. And one of the students said, one of the things I found about your classes are that um, you don't give us the answers or even lead us to the answers. You help us ask better questions. And I went, oh, I mean, thank you. And also, yeah, right? Like that is, I think, what I do, right? And hey, that kind of worked, right? And so that student was sort of able to mirror back to me, right? Yeah, I think that is why I'm here and what I'm trying to do. And I hope it works sometimes, right? So for that student to affirm that, yeah, it was really helpful for me going, yeah, I think that's why I'm here, right? Is to just have students think differently and ask different questions about the world that they encounter than
That's
they might otherwise have asked, right?
Yeah, that's so great that you got that feedback, and
Yeah,
we love hearing those stories of
yeah,
times people remember their why, and that's a
yeah,
one where, and I'm so glad
yeah.
that you give students that. This is kind of a side note, but
Sure.
you give students the opportunity to record their
Yeah,
thoughts and their
yeah,
feedback for you. I feel like
yeah.
that's another obvious. In everything that you said, we have heard that you're doing an incredible job at what you do. That's like,
Yeah,
just that aside,
yeah. Fair enough.
another
Yeah.
example of
Okay.
something that you do for your
Yeah.
students that is a really, really cool and I'm sure helpful thing, because you're giving them another way to voice their opinions and concerns and feedback.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
have
Well, and for me, right, it's another angle of view on them,
absolutely.
right? For those students, and some of it is selfish. By the end of the term, I'm just tired of reading what they wrote, you know. But yeah, it also gives me a different angle of view on them, right? It's sometimes more casual. I find it allows them to be more authentic. Um, so that just helps me, I think, also understand my students better, which for me is just part of the work. But thank you for affirming that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Kevin, you're just such an amazing human and helper
Oh
and
my.
professor. Even though I haven't had you as a professor, I could just tell.
Yeah.
We have one final question for you today.
Okay.
Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Oh wow. Engage with Fred's work and just let it wash through you. And join the educators neighborhood and dig into that because it is a community of people all searching for the same kind of thing, right? One of my favorite expressions one time, I heard people of a community of faith use to express that journey, right? Is that we're all beggars, telling other beggars where we find bread. So hey, the spring is over there, the water's over there. Let's go together, right, to drink from this well. Mixing the metaphors a little, but you get the idea, right? Like what I find valuable is, um, hey, there's people out there really drinking from this deep well of Fred's work. Drink it together, form groups of affinity and solidarity around that work. And I think that alone can go a long way to helping us feel less awful in this moment, but also building a better world.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for taking the time to join us and share a little bit about your story. And we obviously already knew you pretty well before this,
Sure.
but I feel like just
Yeah.
in the past 20, 30 minutes or so, we've
Awesome.
learned so much more about what you do and why you do what you do. And
Yeah.
it's always a pleasure getting to talk to you.
Well, thank you. And it's always, yeah, both a delight to talk about myself, but also humbling and clarifying. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
I love getting to talk to Kevin. He's just one of those people who just brings me joy every time that I see him, every time that I hear his voice. He's just so wonderful.
Yeah, he has an amazing voice and he always has so many great things to say too. Like there's so many like I don't know phrases and just ideas that he had that I feel like I need to add to my vocabulary, which I
Yes,
already said during the interview, like the discussion we had. Like Fredagogy of helping.
yes, the Fredagogy. Why do we not use that in our day-to-day language?
Don't, and now we're gonna have to. I also want to make a point, and you kind of brought it up as a side note, but I want to re-emphasize the fact that he has his college kids do video reflections is such a personal and lovely thing. And the fact that he remembered what that one student said makes me believe that he truly takes the time to watch every video and like really listens to their feedback and puts them into effect too.
I,
He's such an intentional and thoughtful guy.
He really is, and I think you're right. I don't doubt that he really listens and pays attention. Not only listens to listen, but listens to understand every single student. And I'm sure that that's how he approaches his small group in Educators Neighborhood as well. When people are talking, even just with us, he listens to understand, you know? That's just the type of person he is.
So, which fundamental do you feel really like stood out in this conversation?
Yeah, I think of all of the six fundamentals of learning and growing, I think self-worth and solitude stood out to me. Self-worth for the conversation as a whole, but solitude I had in the back of my mind when he was talking about particularly the themes and like outcomes of his small group of educators neighborhood higher ed folks, and he talked about one of the key themes or takeaway being that people could come together and find a moment of stillness, find a moment of being refreshed, find a moment of being able to, he didn't use these words, but I'm thinking about slowing down. And that really was, you know, the solitude light bulb was going off in my head because that is times of solitude. Even though it's in a community of other educators or other people, finding those moments to slow down, to take a deep breath, to reflect, and to just feel refreshed, that is practicing times of solitude. So I'm so glad, first of all, that our Educators Neighborhood program can be that for some people.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that he is able to help other educators in that higher ed space to practice those times of solitude because that's needed by everybody, especially people who are teaching.
Yeah, and I would even argue that I feel like trust came up quite a bit. There has to be trust in the relationship between the facilitator and the participants of an educator's neighborhood group. And in addition, he talks a lot about how much heart and soul goes into the work of being a teacher. And I feel like there needs to be that reciprocated trust between both the teacher and the student. And even like a moment where he shares that story about his son learning how to swim and the swim teacher, like his son trusted his swim teacher in order to teach him how to swim. And also the swim teacher trusted like his son to listen and be safe in the pool and so on and so forth. So I feel like trust also came up quite a bit.
Absolutely. And in that swim teacher situation, Kevin also is trusting the swim teacher as a parent. He mentioned this, that you hope that teachers are being intentional about what they're doing because as a parent, you're trusting your child, their life, their mind, their journey in life. You're trusting that teacher with your child. So yeah, I agree that the trust was definitely a main part of that conversation with Kevin. And I feel like relationships were a grounding theme in that conversation with him. So, what's at the root of positive, impactful relationships? Trust. So, I definitely agree with that fundamental being a common theme that was brought up.
Mhm. Agreed.
I love what he said about children not only being the future, but also being the present, and that children being the future shouldn't let us as adults off the hook of what kind of world we're building for those children right now. I think that was such an interesting and much needed perspective that he offered on that.
Right. And it basically becomes a partnership of the generations too. You're not making all of these issues to give to the next one. You're all working together, like you said, to building a better world.
I love that partnership of the generations. And that actually makes me think of how Fred Rogers creating Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, yes, it's a children's television show, and yes, it was intended for children to view, but he didn't intend for children to watch it alone. He intended that to be kind of what you said, like a partnership of the generations, because he wanted it to be a co-viewing experience, wanted it to be a child watching with their trusted adult and being able to talk about the show. So even all of the work of Fred Rogers was intended to have that generational partnership as well. So I love that that's kind of tying in an essence of Fred's work too.
Yeah, and the fact that the show was on for what, like 30 years? That's two generations right there that were impacted by it.
And now Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood and Don Quixote and all of Fred Rogers' production shows today, that's a new generation of children and their trusted adults that are getting to experience that as well.
Amazing. No, thank you again, Kevin, for being on our podcast today. It was absolutely amazing. The Fred Rogers Institute advances the legacy of Fred Rogers by investing in the strengths of families and caring adults to support the healthy development of children. To learn more about the Fred Rogers Institute and our initiatives, visit fredrogersinstitute.org and follow the Fred Rogers Institute on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and X.